Oh, look at that.
So
As a
Richard,
CME
if you want to
teacher.
start the presentation, or at least the first slideshow, the first slide.
Sure thing. One moment.
Melissa, do you want to wait a
Yep,
couple
you're
minutes?
ready. Hello, everyone. So welcome to Supporting Transfers, the time of COVID. Today's host is Sandra Gonzalez-Torres. She's the Director of Articulation and Transfer at Community College of Philadelphia. She's a regular presenter of TAAC conference, and it's Sandra's goal to share community college practice with the four-year institutions. So today's session, Supporting CCP Transfers in the time of COVID-19, our CCP colleagues will share what they did to support their students during the past 15 months and what they recommend for us four-year institutions to consider. Sandra?
Thank you so much, Melissa. And thanks for everyone who's here. This is a really fun opportunity to share what we do on an everyday basis. This, of course, has been a very unusual year and a half. And all of us had to really dramatically switch the way that we did business given the circumstances. So one of the things that we want to do today is really focus on what it is that we did to support our students while they were at CCP. Richard, you want to do this next slide? So what it is that we did during that time. We also want to go through the process of how we what we learned, the insights of this very unusual time, what we learned, the planning process. We're already planning to go back in the fall. What does that mean? And then, of course, because this is about supporting transfers, we're going to share a little bit about what we've learned, what we recommend for students as they pursue their four-year institution and as you receive them, and how we think that you might be able to assist them during that process. Okay. Today I have three other partners. We have Dean Ascencio. He's the Dean of Students. We have Richard Kopp, Assistant Dean of Students, and then Patrick Robinson, Coach in the Center for Male Engagement. And while we were initially going to do a panel, Richard, you want to do the next slide? Well, we were initially going to do a panel. What we decided as we were planning and reviewing things, we decided that it made more sense to answer all of the questions I just reviewed from three different perspectives. So from the college-wide perspective, and that's where Dean Ascencio will come in and explain that. Then we'll have Richard look at it from kind of like a middle perspective as what he did and his team did in student life. And then from a one-on-one student perspective with Patrick, who is a coach in the Center for Male Engagement. Okay. So next slide is for David Ascencio.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. And what I'm going to do now is just kind of give you an overview and some touch points on different work that we did with students. But I think that, you know, for the purposes of transfer, one of the things that I want to do is provide context in terms of expectations that students may have that once they graduate, that since they had an experience already here, what it would be like and the expectations they may have when they go to your institutions. And so, you know, I'll be kind of touching base there and then making some recommendations. You know, before, and I call it the matrix, right? Not even online, because we almost went into this abyss or whatever like that, you know, for many students, because they'd never been online. They were totally confused because we shift from being on campus. We went on spring break and then all of a sudden we were back here and we were ready to go. And they said, no, we're going to take 2 weeks off. And then we never came back. So, so what does this mean for the students when we had to go online? And one of the first things that we did was we said, well, number one, how are they going to access information, right? And then the other thing, how can we best communicate that information to them so that they can still go and that they, move forward with their courses, any type of services that they need. So you can see from this slide here, one of the things we had to do was, as every institution had to, was to kind of come up with some policies and procedures and how we're going to move forward. Because while a lot of courses went online, we still had some classes on campus, as we do this term. Like we have a bunch of biology sections, we have culinary, automotive, a lot of the technical trades are still on the campus. So so how are we going to deal with this pandemic, and what were the expectations in terms of what guidelines do we have? What does it look like for students who are online? And then those who are, on campus face-to-face. And, and the reason why I say online, you're thinking, well, it doesn't really have to be guidelines, but it does. Because the thing is, people are still getting infected and sick. And so then, they were like, okay, well, are you going to give me, extension for deadlines for work? And how is that going to work? And we had to talk to faculty about that. And so this was a real team effort. And so, as you can see, we had, and I don't want to go through all these different points, but the coronavirus updates, we had that there because it constantly changed over the last year and a half, I would say. And so, and then one of the things that I had mentioned before was, how are we going to communicate with them? And I don't know if your websites are like ours and others that I've been at other institutions, that when you go into the search feature, you probably have to go through 12 pages before you ever get to wherever you need to go, right? Like we go to Google in order to get to the web page we want to go to. And so the thing is that, we created a one-stop shop hub where there was going to be information. And Sandra, I don't know, can you click on it? Or perhaps if we don't need to, you can just look at this kind of snapshot here that we have, where there we had everything that students would need in order to go to advising. If they needed information, and our learning management system was Canvas. If they needed assistance with Zoom, if they needed library services. So we created one page where they can go. Once they clicked on that, they didn't go to their normal web page. What they did was went to a web page that had contact information and just the information that they needed to know. It was not a lot of links or anything like that, but how to contact someone via email, via Google phone, and also how to navigate that website. And as you can see here to your left is where we had all the areas there. So financial services, you can see there. Of course, we had to administer the CARES Act funding, and what did that look like? So students, of course, were contacting us for that. Also the other departments that we had, and can you go down, if you look on the finding support, we had academic, records and registration, of course, our counseling center, which was busy because students were really stressing out, having a lot of anxiety and difficulty navigating this period. So if you can just go up a little bit, I just wanted to show you quickly that also too, online learning was not for everyone, right? Because we had asynchronous, which is basically you go to a web page and you go into the shell, which we call Canvas, and you retrieved your information, had some contact with other students, so on and so forth. And some people really didn't work well in that type of format. Then we had synchronous, where actually you had a date and time. And so one of the things we did was create a lot of videos as quickly as we could so that we could help students to navigate, synchronous, asynchronous courses, hybrid courses. And so we wanted to make sure that we had this information for them as quick as we could. Can you go to the next slide? And then one of the things that we wanted to do was we work with students in terms, oh, and I'm sorry, on the first page, because it talked about CCP cares, because of course, even though you reached out to departments, let's say you did not get through to someone, let's say in financial aid, an advisor, a counselor, whatever, you could specifically enter your information into this inquiry, and that would be sent to someone where we had staff specifically for that. They would gather that information and then send it directly to like a direct report, meaning like a director, an assistant dean, a dean, so that they could handle that issue. And we would do that within 24 hours. There it goes. And so we wanted to make sure that they had the opportunity to do that and make sure that someone would get back to them within 24 hours. So we did that. And then also working within Zoom, we established in our next slide, we had a schedule of student services forums, and we had it for incoming students as well as current students. So if we had one for incoming students, one of the things that we did is that we created kind of a 10-15-minute presentation for them. And then based on the questions that they had, we would do breakout rooms. So if it was a question for admissions, you went into the breakout room for admissions, financial aid, registration, orientation. If you had a generic question, you went into somewhere else. Then we brought everyone back for any kind of final questions. We did that for incoming as well as our current students, who sometimes, even though we sent them links to different information, they had questions and they just really needed some personalized attention. Because sometimes they just, you know, especially if you're first generation, you just don't know how to manage things. And so that's one of the recommendations that we would make, is that as much as you can be personal with students and have direct access, you know, to them and them to you, is going to be really helpful. And so, as well as for parents, and a lot of the questions they were asking were like, hey, do you have laptop loaners, right? So the institution got like 500 right away, and then we ordered like another 300, 400. You know, how do we communicate with faculty? They're not responding back to me, right? If you have that asynchronous course and someone has like 150 students, you know, how do we get in contact with them? How do we access information and resources? Then also, you know, especially in the beginning of the year, hey, how do I get in contact with the bookstore? You know, and then there was so many issues, as you know, that if you had your book sent to you, you'll probably get them in 3 or 4 weeks, just because the backlog of what was happening. So we had to open up the institution for them to, in a socially distanced way and through appointments, to come get their books. Also, oh, well, I'm going to be on campus, I need a student ID. So we had to kind of work through those type of issues. So, and also too, you know, there were quite a number of students that showed symptoms or who were sick or contracted the COVID virus. And so we had to address those type of issues. Next slide. So one of the things we needed to do, of course, right away is to establish these protocols and expectations. Like one of the things that was kind of put in my category or under my supervision was establishing a contact tracing team. Because I think about 2 or 3 weeks after we went, left campus and were at home, we had a couple of cases where we had to contact 160 students, like right away. And I had to galvanize my staff, and we had to reach out to these students and do some contact tracing. We had to collect data. We had to map out our process. What would that look like from beginning to end? And also too, there were some challenges, not too many, thankfully, with students who didn't want to follow protocol. So again, how do we address them and be developmental during this process rather than punitive? And I had 2 students that I worked with, and luckily we were able to find ways to kind of mediate some issues that they had in a positive way, and they were able to complete the term. Also, we wanted to find different ways to engage students. What are the outlets in terms of engaging them for service delivery from that standpoint, as well as the student experience? What is that going to be like? Like, we're home, we're doing our studying, but still we want to engage. So I know Richard and then Patrick will kind of share a macro and micro level view of the work they did there. Then also too, we did so many sessions, but we noticed not that many students were coming. So we started recording them, right? And creating videos so that we can put them online. So if they couldn't make it during a specific time we had it during the week, they could still go and access that information. And that was very helpful. Also, one of the things that we never did before was chat rooms. Like, when you go on a specific shopping site or whatever, a little bubble comes up, hey, how can I help you? And so we were looking, how can we meet students where they're at and kind of give them responses in an express manner. So if someone had a question right then and there, instead of emailing someone and getting something 2 weeks later, how could we get that information now? And so we received training and we started putting that out there for my different departments within student development, and that was helpful. Then also too, we had to use continuous improvement and debriefing as we went through, right? So we were noticing, okay, we're doing all these programs, we're not getting so many students because we're still keeping to that 1 hour format. And so that was not kind of working. So we decided, hey, let's do the minis. And this really came from my counseling area where they said, you know what, we're starting to do shorter sessions and we're getting more feedback from that. And that seems to be working, whether it's 20 minutes or 30-minute sessions. And let's say you had a workshop that was 1 hour, you could do three 20-minute sessions. And then, too, whatever you do in 20 minutes should be enough that if that student never came back, they got the information that they needed there. And so, again, we were trying to meet students where they were and trying to evolve in terms of service delivery to students. Then, of course, we were not at school, so we needed to, a lot of people or the staff members started getting Google phone numbers. And then two, what we were doing is working with each other in order to have directories internally in terms of our Google phone numbers, because the worst thing we could do is refer to a student, they try to reach us, and then we reach out to someone else and they don't get back to that student, within a day or two, it would take a week or whatever. So we wanted students to have direct contact through a Google number, and that was very efficient and effective. Next slide. Now, one of the things that, in coming back, one of the things that we're going to be working on is having more student forums. We're going to actually have a lot of videos. Number one, encouraging students to get vaccinated. That's number one. And then number two is that what are going to be some of the new type of guidelines that we have when we come to school? Social distancing, wearing a mask, where are stations that you can use to sanitize your hands and protocols. So we're going to be doing a lot of those videos, but also we're going to have these forums online. And one of the things that we decided to do is work with what we call our tier 1 programs or student organizations, which is student government, Phi Theta Kappa, and then the Vanguard, because we feel that peer-on-peer interaction is very effective. We've seen that work before. So we're going to be doing that. And then we're going to have a awareness campaign of everything that we're trying to do. And again, what we give students, and I love to say this, and I know Rich knows, is that I said, give them the need to knows, not the nice to knows, because nice to knows are like this. Need to knows are right here, and that's exactly what they need. If they want more information, they can come here and get it. And so, through Canvas, we had information there, so we funneled direct messaging to them through Canvas. Again, emails. We would have a fact page or a newsletter that we would send out to students. Again, we did a lot of streaming videos so that they can go back to them. And then we were also very effective in using social media. The students, we were monitoring them, and whether it was good comments or complaining, we were able to reach out to them and answer questions. And so we found that to be very effective as well. Next page. And so some of the recommendations that we would have is that, as many of you know, and sometimes it's interesting, some schools have orientations and they put transfer students and incoming students in the same one. And I would highly suggest or recommend that you do transfer students an orientation just for them. that really helps them. They've been already, either they have a year of college or sometimes they have their associate's degree. They don't need all the rigmarole. They just need what they need to know. And I'm sure from your experience, what is it they need to know when they're in your institution. And, again, how to navigate your website. Sometimes it would even help if they're coming in person, have a resource fair where you have different departments that can come in and start asking questions and actually reach someone. Also, one of the things we've done now is send students links to our handbook as well as our catalog, because those things are digital now. They're no longer in paper form. And I think that'll really help them to know where to access resources and how to do that. Also, institutions have Blackboard, they have Desire to Learn. Again, we have Canvas. So they really need to understand exactly what type of learning management system you have and then how to navigate that, because that's not something that they can pick up really quickly. So I think that would be very helpful. And then also outline whatever safety protocols you have, and they know what we've done here in terms of expectations, so that they make sure that, especially if they're going to be on campus or be in your housing, anything like that, or in the cafeterias and be on campus, what are the requirements that they need to follow in order to make sure that they're safe and the community is safe. And then last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, is about having a personalized experience. And so one of the things that my counselors, I saw one time that they had the signature card. I said, hey, what's up with that? It's pretty cool. And the thing is, it came from, I don't know if you saw that doctors, dealing with patients and things like that, everyone was all PPE up or whatever, and they looked like Martians. And so they would go to this patient and all they could see is a mask and this gown and these gloves. And so they started putting these little like name badges around them with a picture so they could see, hey, my name is David and I'm your doctor. My name is Linda and I'm your nurse, so that there would be some type of connection on a personal basis as best as it could be. And similarly, I thought that if, we have something like this, that because everything's become so impersonal, that I said, hey, if they can, attach a name with a face, and then also a little something about me, who is this person? I think that just helps to create more of a connection. It can't hurt. So again, with new people coming into your institution as transfer students, and they don't have the benefit of being there as an incoming freshman, that something like this might help. And we did this through Canva. And we actually had training for this, and all the staff had training for this. And I think it's just a good tool to try to connect with students. And so that's it for me. And I don't know who's next. I think, Richard, you're next.
Yes, so thank you, Dave, for setting the stage. And as I'm sure we're all too fully aware, we've all been through this process now going on 13, 14. I'm losing counts of how many months there are now that we've been in this lockdown pandemic. But I, for one, am eager to get back to campus, as I'm sure all of you are, if you're not already in some form or fashion in a staggered or hybrid form. And as we start to think about that, we're also thinking about what that looks like for us in terms of re-engaging with our students in person and or hybrid this fall. But before that, I wanted to let you know how we got there from last March as well. Dave set the stage for what the institution's approach was and how we handled the early stages of the pandemic from an institutional perspective. And as Sandra mentioned, I'm going to now talk you through some of the things we did on a little bit more of a minutiae level from a division of student development, student engagement perspective. And so, as we all were throwing this curveball at the same time, regardless of what institution we work with, I'm sure many of you have experienced some of the same things I'm going to be talking about here. And hopefully some of the things that we learned in terms of lessons can apply to what you're going to be doing in terms of moving forward for a transition back this fall as well, if you're not already in the midst of that transition now. And what we did first and foremost, we thought, well, this is just going to be a few weeks. Let's figure out how we can transition our spring 2020 semester programs to the virtual world, much like our academic counterparts were asked to transition their classroom setting into the virtual arena. We should be able to easily take what we already had planned for in-person, scrap it, and come up with a new plan for virtual to get us through the end of the semester. So from mid-March last year to the first week of May, we moved all of our programs virtually and did the best that we could to quickly learn Zoom and all the other virtual tools that were available to us at that time to see how we could take at least most of what we were doing from a student engagement perspective and make it similar as best as possible in the virtual world. We learned quickly, of course, as many of you did, that a lot of that stuff does not translate. But what we also did soon enough learn is that there's new things that you can do in a virtual sense that you could not do in an in-person world. And I think a lot of what we probably all have learned over this past year is that when we go back, it's not going to be back to normal as we once knew it. I think there's a lot of lessons learned that we're going to be able to translate and transcribe into a new normal that I think we will walk away better for it. There is a silver lining to all of this. There's a lot of bad that has happened, but I like to tend to look more on the glass half full side of things and be more positive. I think my colleagues will attest to that. And that though there was a lot of angst, a lot of frustration, a lot of sadness over this past year, how can we take that and build on it so that moving forward we have an even better foundation for our student engagement programs for, God forbid, if this should ever happen again, but even hopefully if it doesn't, that now we're engaging students in a totally different way and not just in person. We already had students who were online at our institution, or in particular, we have 3 other additional regional centers. I work mainly at the main campus. I do have a coordinator who reports to me, whose responsibility is to do student engagement programs at the regional centers. But oftentimes, they have, a fraction of the types of activities or programs because their budget is a fraction of what we can offer at the main campus. So there's ways now that we can be able to incorporate those students or students who are, around, the various parts of the city that just can't get into campus on a particular day if they're not studying there for a particular class, that they can now attend and engage with us, whereas maybe before they wouldn't have been able to. So all those lessons learned that, I'll recap at the end. But where do we get started? So we finished up last spring semester realizing, okay, well, we need to touch base with our students and find out exactly what they might be looking for if we're going to be in this for a little bit longer haul than we first anticipated we were going to be. So we took the opportunity to add additional survey questions because our students, much like yours, I'm sure, fall into the survey fatigue category. And we knew they weren't going to answer anything probably too specific or too long or lengthy. So we capitalized on an opportunity that it happened to be our upcoming student government elections for the next school year. And we already have an online program where we run online elections. So we didn't need to figure out something new for a transition there. But what we did do was take the opportunity to add in additional questions related specific to virtual programming as other questions on the ballot. And you'll see here some of the quick responses that we got in terms of feedback, in terms of if we were going to be planning some sort of summer programming, what would that look like, and what would you be interested in, and when would you attend? And of course, we got a lot of great feedback, and we thought that, okay, now we have everything we need to know to be able to plan accordingly for the summer. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that typically, assume most of you all, programming kind of dwindles down during the summer months. We have less students that are attending, and we usually use that as time to plan and prepare for the next academic year. But being that this was totally a new environment and world that we were heading into, we wanted to make sure we had a connection with our students and that we weren't just, leaving them to the wayside and removing that physical connection with the student development offices over the summer months in anticipation that we'd see them again in the fall. And then, of course, then I'm glad that we did, because we didn't see them then for 2 more semesters thereafter. So in anticipation, we asked some of these extra questions. You can see here, we're basically asking the basics. When should we hold events? What days, what times, how long? And you can see, the top answers that we kind of looked at in terms of when and what time were kind of the middle or end of the week. The days really didn't seem to fluctuate too much in terms of what was more preferable, except for Tuesdays, Fridays, and Thursdays, a little bit different than the rest of the week. We did ask about weekends, even though traditionally we did not do weekend programs at our community college. We wanted to see if that looked different in the virtual world. What were people's lives looking like now that they were balancing so many different things? Did that change in terms of how they wanted to be engaged? And time of day. Typically, we would normally, in an in-person setting, plan events in the middle of the day that was between classes. So as they were running from one class to the other, they might have a 2-hour break. We would look at the schedule gap across the board, and that's when we typically traditionally did programs. Well, that obviously went way out the window when most of our classes not only were online, of course, but were also asynchronous, and they weren't logging in at a particular time for a particular course. They were doing it at their leisure. So really, we needed to know when were they available based on their work schedule, their care for a parent, their care for children, whatever else they had going on. When could we plan programs? And for how long? As Dave said, we've mainly started out with 1-hour-long programs, and that did rise a little bit to the top in terms of length of time. And we slowly transitioned that we realized shorter, more bite-sized programs, 30 to 45 minutes, were even better and more impactful. And then in terms of what students wanted to see or how they would want to connect with us, like in terms of different types of virtual platforms, we had started out very Zoom heavy, even though I think by the end of this, we're all Zoom fatigued. But you can see here that Zoom was the most popular choice, followed by some of the other social media platforms. So we continued to use Zoom early on and continued to do so moving forward. In terms of if they were interested in virtual events, this is where I think that they told us they would be interested. You see, okay, great. People want to get involved and get engaged. Let's plan something then for them. But we've realized that we didn't have as much engagement as we thought, because while they told us if they couldn't attend, why they wouldn't be attending, I think this stood the test of time even still today, that people even a year in are still adjusting to their new normal. They've got a lot going on in their lives. This isn't necessarily the main focus of their academic time right now. They are focused on the coursework so that they can squeeze in everything else in their lives. So we're kind of, unfortunately, as Dave was referring to, and I'm going to throw this back at him, the need to knows versus the nice to knows. I think we fell into the nice to know information, or the nice to have information, and what they needed at the moment was to focus on academics and to be able to know that they had, support structure in place that they needed to lean on, but that we were the side pieces, not necessarily the main course. But that's okay. We were still there to be with them. And as Dave mentioned, what we learned early on too is that we planned a full summer slate of activities last summer, and normally, again, we normally in a typical year in person would not have a full slate of programming, but we wanted to make sure we had something at least once every day for someone to connect to. And we did it at various points throughout the course of the day, whether it be morning, midday, evening. We tried all different types of times to connect with them, different days of the week. And then we planned many more activities for the fall. In fact, the fall and this current spring semester, we've combined to have over 225 virtual programs out of the student development division per semester. And we've ranged in the types of formats that we've offered. You can see here from speakers to speaker panels to DJ parties, YouTube sessions, the live chat that David mentioned, that if people just wanted to log on and connect with us in real time and answer a quick question, or if they wanted to jump on with us every Wednesday morning for the past year, we've held a virtual coffee house with our staff that, outside of not being able to get together in person or stop by our student life offices and just have that connection, particularly with our club and org officers and student leaders, hey, jump on with us and grab a cup of coffee. It might be 5-10 minutes just to say hi and start your day. And maybe it's just to get a quick question answered as well. But hopefully it's just to put a familiar face in front of you, and you can get your day started. So we tried a variety of different types of things. We transitioned our leadership certificate program to a virtual setting. Those types of things worked really well. We took Spirit Week, made that virtual, and we took our mascot and brought them to the virtual world to continue boosting school spirit throughout the downtime that we were having as well. One of the key things that we did in terms of figuring out what types of programs students wanted, I think 1 year ago today, we had the unfortunate death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, and George was not the one and only. Unfortunately, there's been many before him and many after, and we realized, as the country did, that was a rallying point. And we wanted to band together as a community and figure out how are we going to rally around social justice causes and move things forward and make them action oriented and not just have a session and be done with it and then we never talked about it again. So our office partnered with the president's office and formed it was just an initial one program on June 9th that turned into an entire year-long series called Enough is Enough. And we worked with the office to do the second portion of that. The president's office planned the teach-in events where they would orchestrate multiple different professionals across the tri-state area, providing their expertise on various topics within the social justice platform. And then we would host concurrent expression sessions that immediately followed so that people could listen to the panel and get the information and get the knowledge and hear different perspectives, and then jump in with their peers, faculty, students, staff, and community members and partners within the city to be able to learn from one another, share our feelings, be as we may in a safe place. It was unrecorded. It was in private breakout sessions for smaller group conversations, and then we came back together and debriefed as a larger group as well. That series continues and actually is an award-winning series now that the college has been recognized for. And we realized that really the summer and fall, most of our programming stemmed from that particular topic because that was what everyone was focused on in the country and what we wanted to make sure we were focused on in terms of our time and attention as an institution as well. As I already mentioned, we had the coffee house every Wednesday morning, and also we're available via live chat. That was Monday through Friday, 8 to 6, anytime people could log in. We had our staff on at all times to be able to answer questions in the immediate moment, or again, just for people to pop in. And we created an entire slogan and campaign around it. We called it Click and Connect, and said that, if you're missing us as much as you are, as much as we're missing you, you can log in with us and chat with us, or have a quick coffee with us any particular day of the week, or on Wednesday mornings for coffee. We also transitioned our food resource program for our food insecure students. We transitioned that to a contactless curbside service pickup, much like our grocery stores were maintaining before and obviously during the pandemic. And so we instituted that in the start of the fall semester. We got everything ready last summer, stocked the shelves again so that we could reopen. And even though we had to close before the semester was over, we were able to still distribute to 80 different students throughout the course of those 2 months that we were open in the fall, and service quite a few of our family members accordingly. And we continue to provide them with food resources to connect them throughout the city and make sure that they know where they can get food during this time until we reopen. We are planning to reopen our in-person snack rack and food pantry this fall. How we got the word out, we used our Pride portal, which is our internal student engagement hub. It's a product that many of you may have at your institutions. It's formerly Campus Labs, now called Anthology. And we have their Engage product. We call it Pride Portal here at the college. That was our major push to get information out for students, whether it be virtual programs, clubs and organization involvement in the pandemic, etc. Of course, a lot of it was social media heavy in terms of how we got word out. And we worked closely with our marketing communications team that early on developed a new weekly e-newsletter that went out to the college. And about half of that newsletter was dedicated to all the programs and services we offered. And as Dave mentioned, all of our programs, we've pretty much for the most part, outside of some of the Enough is Enough expression sessions, we recorded and we've archived now onto our YouTube channel. So even though attendance was not what we had hoped and expected it to be, we understood the students' lives continued to have other purposes and meeting throughout the course of this time. And so we wanted to make sure that whenever they were available or interested in participating in some of those programs, they could do it at their leisure, on demand, 24/7. And it's almost time for where we're at in society nowadays, that nobody watches a show in real time. They jump on Netflix and watch it when they want to. They binge it, or they watch it, whenever they're free. So it's almost part and parcel for where we're at nowadays anyways. Our Pride portal was really the strength and backbone of where we were at. I'll share the link with you in terms of what that looks like, but you can see here, everything lived in this hub. We're able to put important announcements here at the top of our page. Students can see what memberships they're involved with, or upcoming events, and latest news. And we had all of our hot links to the various programs and services we were running virtually on the side right there on the homepage. And right now we are running our summer sensational summer virtual programming series. So students can click in and see everything that is happening in real time and add it to their calendars moving forward. All of this is building up in terms of where we're at moving forward for the fall, in terms of nuggets to take away. We're transitioning so that our students know that they have an opportunity to not only participate in our programs in an enriching and meaningful way, but that it is adding value to their co-curricular experience. And we are in the process of building a pathway. We are a guided pathways institution academically. And so we are using that language to translate over into the student involvement world as well, so that students know that they are not only just on an academic pathway, but a co-curricular, holistic student development pathway, that whatever they're involved with outside of the classroom, whether it be they joined a club or organization, or took on a leadership role, or they participated in a leadership certificate series, or went to a couple workshops, all of those components to their outside the classroom life will be tracked in our Pride portal this fall. They're already being tracked now, and we've built the foundation for it, but we'll be creating actual pathways that are visual that you see here on the screen, that they'll be able to see their path towards completion of particular aspects of the core of the pathway, so that when they graduate, they can see that not only have they completed an academic degree, but they will be able to have an extension of their portfolio for their resume to show all those rich content outside the classroom experiences to a future employer to make themselves more marketable. So that's where we're at in terms of moving forward. And I'm going to pass that on to a more micro level of the engagement to our CME expert, and happy to answer any questions specifically after Patrick is finished.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard. So again, my name is Patrick Robinson. I am the lead support coach in the Center for Male Engagement. Just to give you some brief background into what CME is. CME is an office on campus that is dedicated towards helping students of color, minority men, in their transition into the college, and for them to be successful, they can transition out with a certificate degree or to another 4-year institution. So we typically provide targeted academic and non-academic support, just realizing that our students are more than students. They come from a number of backgrounds, life experiences. So we definitely are intentional about taking the whole student in and looking to support them. It's wild that COVID was the one thing that everybody in the world experienced on some level. So prior to COVID, our CME office on campus was a home away from home for our students, a safe space. How the dean was saying earlier, providing a personalized experience. It's hard to put into words what our office was able to do in person with students. So when we got the news first that we were going to make that transition, 2 weeks to figure out what was going to go on, one of the first things my office did was try to think about how we could start to create our in-person office and make that virtual. So we started to try to create our own. Just back up a second. Students aren't the best at checking their emails. So while the college was doing a number of great things, our students are more likely to respond from some correspondence that have our name on it or CME just because they're more familiar with us, and they may be somebody from a different department. So we started to create our own set of database as far as creating a Google page that pretty much provided them with quick links so that they were able to get to the different aspects of the college. The dean talked about the web page that we created as a college. So we used that web page and put it in our database and just gave our students a bunch of quick links, whether they needed to get help from financial aid, academic advising, a lot of the pertinent offices on campus. We created those resources for them. But the first thing that we wanted to do was just provide reassurance, just to let them know, like, hey, this is something that none of us have faced before, and it's okay. How we were with you in person, we're still here online, and this is how you can access us, just with the databases and everything of that nature. And one of the main things we did too was, how do we get in contact with our students? Because typically we were so used to that in-person thing. So we went and got their personal emails, their CCP emails, whatever phone number we can get on file, and really just started to call and email them just to give them an update in that 2 weeks of what was going on and how they could access us, and just to get a sense of where they were, just because we really provide support for a wide range of students. So which is very important that we didn't lose anybody throughout that 2 weeks. And it was not interesting, but we were able to, there was one student in particular who was very, very engaged with our office when we were in person. He was in the office all day. He was texting us all day. Like he was very much a part of CME. So when the 2 weeks happened, and even once after the 2 weeks, we noticed as a staff that none of us have heard from this student in particular. Like we emailed them, texted them, called them, but we weren't getting a response. But we didn't let that stop us. So we kept reaching out in different forms and fashions. And then one of my teammates were able to actually get in contact with the student. And what we were able to find out, the student wasn't really ignoring us, he was just dealing with life. So the student was working in a restaurant, so he was laid off, so he lost his source of income, but was also responsible for a child and providing rent. So that was a very stressful situation that he had no clear direction on how to get support. But during that time, the college had access to emergency funds where we could use some of those funds to support a student like that in need. So with us being persistent and reaching out to this student, we were able to get him connected to the resources that the college provided. He was awarded the emergency fund where we were able to provide assistance with paying or covering his rent in a time where he didn't have any sources of income. And in addition to that, us being intentional about realizing that our students are more than just students, that they may have some hardships, and how Richard talked about the food pantry and how big of a resource that was to all of our students. So as a staff, we came together and put together some small donations and went to the market ourselves and created like CME care packages. And in that process of the 2 weeks, we had a survey that we created to try to get a sense of what the students were going through, whether it was just making sure that they had the essentials, whether it was safe housing, food access, things of that nature. And then from that survey, we were able to identify some students that had some potential food insecurities. And then from there, we were able to take those care packages, deliver them in a safe way during that time, just to ensure that our students were able, because we can't ask them to be students if they can't eat first. So we have to make sure that they're safe and secure on that end before we can even worry about a paper or something that's due the following week. So that was some of the level of intentionality that we had during that transition into COVID, some of the services that we provide. And I would say after we got not a hang of, okay, this is where we're going to be online. We may not know how long, but we know this is the landscape that we're going to be in. We started to make some adjustments and transitions. You could go to the next slide. So again, we got back to being able to have a lot of our programs. I would say in the latter part of the spring semester. So this is just one of the screenshots from one of our CME S3 series. So this is a program where we partner up with, sorry, I figured the dog will bark at some point. With this program, we partner up with external mentors or members of the community that are in a wide range of different professions and areas. And we come together the last Friday of each month and have a different conversation just about different aspects of life, from having a growth mindset to what makes it hard about being successful in college. We just try to have a bunch of conversations that we've all dealt with on some level and really just remove all the barriers and things at the door or on the Zoom link. And then we just have open general conversations. So this was just an example of one of those conversations that we started to have, really just looking to engage our students more. And my colleagues have said it previously, it wasn't necessarily every program about the quantity of students that we had, because even when we had Zoom meetings with students and there would be 3 people on the Zoom session, they would just thank us just for having the opportunity just to talk to somebody or just to be able to vent. So once we started to get feedback like that, we just started having like CME happy hour, CME office hours, where a different support coach would just get online, no set topic, no set anything, you just be on Zoom. And if a student hopped online with you, they hopped on. And then some of the most general, organic, like some of the best conversations we've had as a staff came from some of those happy hour office hours. So that spring semester guided us in a perfect direction to, once we got a handle on being able to throw programming, we realized that CME, unfortunately, is not able to support every student at CCP. So, but how do we reach out to them to let them know who we are in this virtual space, because they didn't have the same opportunity to walk back around campus to get introduced to us. So one of the transitions that we made was we made an online brochure. And this is one of the pages from the online brochure that we blasted out to students and had posted around the college that gave students a sense of why CME. So just some things on a personal support coach. So that's somebody like myself will be a personal advocate for the student throughout their transition at the college. Offering support. So we even was offering our students direct tutoring services online directly, so they didn't have to go to the learning lab, or we just try to eliminate barriers or steps to provide the resources to our students directly. And then that last piece, the social and cultural enrichment, typically in as BC or before COVID, we would have a up to 75 person in-person summer bridge program where we would bring new students or first-time students to CCP and pretty much put them through like an onboarding process where they were able to get brush ups in a lot of the core classes. So what that program did was it allowed them to not only get connected to the resources at the college, but get them familiar with what college classes would be like, so that when the fall semester started, that they were a lot more comfortable and confident to succeed. So one of the great things that we did, during the transition to the summer was we transitioned the summer program to being remote or completely remote. So we made some changes where the students didn't necessarily have as much class brush up time as they would have had in person, but we still were able to connect them to all of the major college resources and then provide them with the tips and skills to be able to be successful in an online landscape. So this was the first summer program that was geared towards providing students with the tips and skills to be successful in an online landscape. So to be able to make that transition in COVID on the fly was something great that our office was able to do. And this is another page from our brochure, and this is just some testimonials from some past CME students. And what's amazing is these 3 students listed or here, they all recently graduated. The first 2 from Kutztown University graduated a few weeks ago, and twin Jared, he graduated from Temple as well. So we just wanted, we could preach what we do to students until we're blue in the face, but when they're able to see a student that looks like them, that's in the same position as them, get an experience or see what experience they got from CME, it makes them that much more comfortable with utilizing the services that we have. And I would say, just also, we're able to make transitions to this semester. We're just realizing that our students were getting a lot of support academically throughout the college. So we wanted to support them in the non-academic ways to keep them engaged with the college. So we created, and we noticed that a lot of our students weren't able to attend programming due to like job resources and things like that. So my colleague created a CAP internship program where we were able to start placing students with internships remotely so that they didn't have to stress about trying to go find a job externally, where we were able to pay them for being students. So things like that, we're just looking to be very intentional about how we kept our students engaged and attached to not only CME, but the overall college.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I know that there was a lot of information, but I think you hopefully can see how things kind of go in with a focus on the personal contact, understanding how the student works, and understanding like how the institution and the student relate to each other. So yes. So was it David who sent me? Richard, who needs to jump off and needs to ask a question right away?
Now, if anyone has a question for me, because I have my other meeting, you know, I'll be more than glad to answer those questions.
Yes,
now.
so we can open it up to questions. Any questions for Dean Ascencio, David Ascencio? You can unmute and ask questions if you'd like. Okay, and obviously you can all, what platform is used for the hub? I think you're referring to the Pride portal, is that correct? Renee? I don't know where you are, Renee.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so that would be actually a Richard question. So go ahead and answer that, Richard. Hi,
Yep,
David.
so we use, we call it the Pride portal, but it's, if you're familiar with those types of companies that are out there, it was formerly known as Campus Labs. They merged with OrgSync, which was the other major competitor out there that had student involvement platforms, and now they're under one new company called Anthology, and the product itself is called Engage. They have probably 12 or 15 different higher education software solutions now. Engage is their student involvement platform, and I can drop that link in the chat for you to check out as well.
Thank you so much.
Great.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Well, a couple of things that I wanted to at least mention that that were either alluded to or not explicitly brought up, because again, we want to focus on the transfer aspect of it. I think you can kind of get a sense of, as an institution, we have over the years tried to really get to know our students in the best way that we can, and trying to serve the students in the best way that we can. Every semester, we as an institution regularly send all students a survey in the spring, and every spring the topic is a little different. Clearly this year the topic was very COVID related. But for example, when we realized that a lot of students didn't have computers to go online, to do this a whole virtual thing, we, as David mentioned before, we really were able to collaborate and come together and get a bunch of laptops and do a laptop loaner. It started out with 500 computers, and then I think we bought another 300, and et cetera, et cetera. And really some of that was care CARE Act money, but some of it was not. Some of it was simply understanding the need of the population. Obviously, a computer doesn't work without internet access if you're trying to take online courses. And so collaborating with Comcast for low income web access was also vital, right? So it's really a combination of where are our students today? What do they need? Our students are predominantly Pell qualified students. About 70% of our students are students of color at all levels of income and all levels of ages. And so again, trying to figure out what their needs were. One of the things that we did in addition to the survey that Richard mentioned earlier was an actual phone campaign, which I was a part of, and I know that Richard and Patrick probably were too. It was really dividing up the list of the students who had been attending in spring and calling them partly to find out if they were going to enroll, right? So some of it was an enrollment campaign, but truly a lot of it was what's going on, because as has been mentioned many times in this presentation, if the students are not able to eat, if they don't have housing, if they don't have the usual basic needs, they're not going to have the bandwidth to do well academically, much less if they even have the time or the disposition. So, so those are things that we continue to consider, and that we would hope that transfer institutions have, gradually been learning and gradually been implementing in how they serve our CCP students as well as other community college students. Questions? Okay. I want to mention two things. I want to actually ask the panel, what changes do you hope we keep, Richard and Patrick? What changes do you hope we keep from the lessons that we've learned from going online, going virtual, or having to do things in a different way?
Great question. I think we're gonna keep quite a bit of it, actually, because I don't see it going away. I see that we are going to, for at least the immediate future in the fall, we're still going to have some sort of social distancing in place, I'm sure. Whether PPE is going to be required or not is yet to be determined in terms of where we're at with guidelines with the city. But certainly we're still going to have students who may or may not be on campus. So I think that we're going to have some sort of blended programming schedule for the fall, and have a mix of in-person, virtual only type of events, and that we're already looking into purchasing, technology equipment that we can have webcams and handhelds, lighting, at specific events, so that we can make those digital and online simultaneously while they're being in person. And of course, too, in terms of any overflow, if we're going to have capacity levels, we're going to have to make sure that only a certain number of people can attend the event. So do we have overflow areas or overflow rooms, or is it just an overflow virtual room that people will be able to participate in, whatever it may be? And I think that those things are in some form will stay, because I think, previously when we've done in-person events, I think there's been a lot of great that have come out of those types of things. But you could spend a small fortune on a program, and it could be really great in terms of all the success factors, and attendance being one of the indicators. But regardless, once the event's over, that's in the books and that's done, and it's over with. Well, if we can capture it now and more people can see it thereafter, then we've, continued to make that investment even, more worthwhile in terms of our ROI. And particularly a whole unpopulated or untapped population in terms of our online students and our regional center students, which I mentioned previously. So I see a lot of that in some form sticking long throughout the fall and continuing to incorporate those aspects. We, as also mentioned, and you can see here on the slide, our social media interaction went way up during this past year. I don't see that really going down either, because that's where the students are at anyways, even before the pandemic. Fortunately or unfortunately, we're in a social media driven world, and even in-person events were starting to lessen in terms of attendance over the last year or two before that anyways, because people want their immediate instant gratification, on-demand satisfaction, and they don't want to necessarily talk to somebody in person. They just want to do that through their phones or their social media accounts. Well, I think we've all at least realized now that some human interaction is critical to to who we are as human beings over this past year, and that we don't want to rely too heavily on the social channels. But I think that we already knew that that was a part of where society was going, and we might as well just embrace it and include it and learn from what we've been able to figure out over this past year and build it into our plans moving forward. A specific example that I'll state that just happened, and Sandra was a great help with this. We spent a great deal of time figuring out what we were going to do to celebrate our graduates, not only from this year as well as from our class of 2020. And we did hold a virtual commencement ceremony a couple of weeks ago, but we wanted to make sure there was an in-person component to that. And in lieu of being able to gather as a larger, typical commencement audience, we held a grad walk that many schools were doing across the country. And we took some good nuggets from particular peer institutions that were doing it well. And we had almost 600 students and 2,100 family members come out over the course of a 4-day week after commencement was held virtually, to be able to come back to campus and have an opportunity to hear their name called as they cross the stage, get pictures professionally done, both individual portrait shots as well as with family members. And I think that those are components that we did not have at a traditional in-person commencement because it's just too long by nature and less personal. I think those components will stay in some form or fashion as we move forward, that we will have either smaller breakout opportunities to celebrate our graduates individually by program or degree type, and then still have the larger commencement with the keynote speaker. But things that we were already looking to change that maybe certain folks were just stuck in their ways at colleges and institutions across the country, we might be able to now leverage the opportunity to say, look, this worked in the virtual setting, we were able to figure it out, it can work now moving forward too. So how can we take some of those lessons learned and make them part of the new strategy moving forward? So it's going to be a different day, but I think again, for the better, there's some lessons to be taken moving forward.
Yeah. There's so many times that we've suggested things and people have told us it's not going to work. And then of course we had to do it because of the pandemic, and oh yeah, it kind of did work. So how about you, Patrick? What do you think you guys will keep?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to everything that Richard said, I think a lot of the mindset changes that we had to make from COVID will remain. I think COVID showed us all how human we all are and how we all need support in different areas. And COVID forced us to get creative on how we provided support and how we were supporting students on a more intentional basis. And we saw how once we were able to get creative on how we supported students, how in turn, once we poured into them as people and as humans, how it made them better students. So I think if we keep this mindset that, yes, it might feel like a brick wall sometimes, but we keep trying to be creative on how we can support a student. We never know what the results may be. So I just think that creative mindset and just being forced to do something different is the mindset, or something that's going to carry over from COVID that we may have not had before.
Any questions from the group, from the audience? Well, I have a question for you, since you guys have all been so quiet. I'm going to give you a test, if you will, just based upon what you've heard as four-year institutions. And I know there's some community college representatives here, but for those of you who represent our four-year institutions, obviously there was a lot of overlap. I can only guess that we've all tried numerous things and many of them were very similar. But just based upon what you've heard that our students have either gone through or been supported with, what kinds of things can you think of that you will need to consider as our students leave CCP this May and then possibly arrive at your institutions in the fall?
Hi, I'm Karina Dreher. I'm from Widener University. Just one thing that really struck with me, and somebody mentioned during this presentation, is that the students, we all know that transfer students are, busy with other things, right? They have, oftentimes they have families that they have to take care of. They have jobs that they have to keep, and it's tough to maintain, the demands of the virtual world, right? We all, I think 2-year institutions, 4-year institutions, jobs, like we all jumped on this virtual reality, and we all felt the fatigue, but at the same time we couldn't stop because things had to keep moving, right? So one of the things that was mentioned was that because of the involvement and the attachments that transfer students have, it was tough for them to attend events during the day. It's tough for them to cover that if the events were offered during the day. I know as an institution, we try to alternate times, right? We try to offer maybe like a 12 o'clock session and then a later in the afternoon session. So maybe keeping this in mind and hearing you share, that indeed transfer students are, it seems like more receptive to times that are off schedule, right? Maybe try and schedule something more, outside of the 9 to 5 limits, right? More, maybe be a little bit more flexible. Now we did offer flexibility, of course, because we had to, but I feel like maybe even more, we have to be even more flexible to that, and more receptive to the fact that yes, we have to try and be as flexible as we can so that we can accommodate transfer students. I don't know if anybody
And
else.
as you heard, I mean, sometimes a 10-15 minute whatever could have been enough. Happy hour, right? Isn't that what you called it, Patrick? Or a quick little session repeated 4 or 5 times seemed to work better than a 1 hour long session, right, Richard?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm going to steal the happy hour, Patrick, for the fall, I think, because our students aren't getting up at 9 a.m. to have coffee hour with us. So maybe they'll do happy hour with us from 4 to 5 or 5 to 6. But our coffee hour was an hour, and we reduced it to a half an hour because that was enough time for people just to pop in and pop out. So yeah, I don't think it needs to be any extensive length of time. People just want an opportunity to poke their head in and engage. Something similar that we did with that was our welcome fairs, our welcome week fairs. So we typically would have welcome week, week-long worth of festivities, and then the tabling fairs for all of our organizations and partnering student services offices. Well, we transitioned that and went through probably 2 or 3 different iterations over this past year of what that looked like in a virtual world. And I think this past one was the best that in terms of setup, that we had it for a 2-hour window of time, but people could come in and poke their head in at any particular time. It didn't need to stay any longer than 5 to 10 minutes, but people were available and they could go into different breakout rooms to see the various different offices, basically like you would at an organizational fair, that you could poke your head in and just say hello to 1 or 2 tables and get the information needed and head out. We had that available for people so they didn't have to stay and hear a 10-minute presentation by, Single Stop and another 10-minute presentation by Sandra's office. And while we all would love to hear all of that and would be enriched and engaged, people want what they want and they want to get out and get on with their
But I
day.
don't
So
hear all of it.
setting it up so that, yeah, so setting it up so people get what they need. And, again, back to Dave, the need to knows and they get out. I think we've, figured out ways that we can manage that.
Yeah. And I think just to add on that really quickly, it's something that may be beneficial for some of the four-year institutions that we noticed. So for this past spring semester, we started having more programming that wasn't even necessarily related to the college, but pouring into the students. So we had a series of real estate programs where we walked students throughout the process of even how to start saving your money, how to identify homes, and just teaching them the process where they were able to pick up some tangible skills that they could apply across different aspects of life. And then we also had some like financial literacy, like build your credit, things like that. So with those programs, we started to see more of our non-traditional students take part in those. So students that we didn't have much interaction with before, we pretty much hooked them in with those programs, and then they bought on to a lot of the other services that we provided. But it all started with providing them with programming that was kind of built more towards where their lives are, but it also still worked for the students who are, I guess, traditional, where they could still build the same type of goals and outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else wants to mention something that they would like to implement at their institution, or they want to add? Melissa, don't make me call on you. Danny, others?
I mean, I do know that for us, and it's going to stay, is we used to like never do virtual appointments. We're just so brick and mortar. But with transfers, it's really, I think that's going to stay forever. Of course, well, if they would like to come to campus, great. But sometimes you get these students who take 2 buses to come to us, and then for a 10-minute appointment just seems so silly for everybody. So it is, I don't know what made our brain finally be like, wait, we can do this on this Zoom. So that I'm definitely going to be keeping, offering that more and more. Like, please, if you only have a quick appointment, but you want to see my face, log on to Zoom instead of, having to travel to Northeast Philly if you don't need to for a quick appointment. So definitely going to be, I think, keeping virtual appointments for these transfer students a lot longer than need be. So.
Yeah, I agree. And I also noticed that a lot of institutions did virtual tours, like the campus tours. And I don't know, you guys have a better sense because of your hits, but it seemed to me that students were asking me about those. So that seemed to be popular. Yeah,
definitely it opened up, and especially for us, we couldn't let students into residence halls and with residents living there. So that even helps with our traditional population, that they could at least see that. We weren't allowed to have people in our nursing clinicals because there was already students there. So those type of things, we really would be like, well, go home and look at it. So at least they got some sort of sense until we are able to open up and be a little bit more allowing people on campus longer. So as you know, we're in Philadelphia, so we're under all the strict as you guys are with the regulations. So, our friends in Delaware County and Chester County have a little bit more open space than we do. But so definitely the virtual tours have helped us a lot.
Yeah.
I think even for us in Delaware County, I mean, having the option of a virtual tour was definitely beneficial. We also had an option of, do your own tour, right? So we set up stations where they can go, like, let's say if they're on campus, if they want to walk around, we set up stations where they get to a point, they have a key, right, that tells them where to go to find out more information. And so they have that option. So they can,
like a museum.
Right, exactly. So that helped a lot. And then what other thing that was very beneficial? Just the option of, we offered so many different programs, right? Like everybody tried to offer so many different programs. I think that honestly, people want the in-person, right? Because they missed that, and that's how you better experience things. And the tours were very popular. The in-person tours were very, very popular, but there were a lot of folks who couldn't do that, right? So when somebody comes to campus, they're seeing the facilities, they get the chance to talk to people. Now, it was different because even if you take an in-person tour, you don't necessarily get, you tour a campus that's kind of ghost town, and there's no folks available from different departments for the students to talk to. So, because everybody's working remotely. So the fact that, you couple things, right? So you reach out to a student and say you can do the in-person, of course, but here are additional resources, and we provided a nice long list of resources where they can get, more information. So here's the contact from Residence Life, here's the contact from dining services, here's the contact from
the option is what's really great, right? Because we're open for students or families, but at the same time, we didn't really have that, so it was a little different. But I love the fact that that is an option, and I agree with Melissa. I think that's going to continue to be our new reality.
Absolutely.
We have only a few more minutes left. Anything else anyone wants to mention? And I don't know, is Jenna still there? Jenna Marino?
Hello, I'm here.
Hello. Did you want to say anything about international students?
Sure. I can say I definitely agree with Patrick in that sometimes the traditional ways that we're sending out information, like email, our students are not necessarily reading those emails, not maliciously, but they have a lot going on and they're getting a lot of information. So what helped us, which was something we were working on prior to the transition to online, but really ramped it up, is we created our own Canvas page for the International Student Services Office, because we know students are already going to Canvas for their classes. So instead of having it be a separate thing, they're already logging on to Canvas. So if they see our class, they see the announcements there. That has been helpful. And also using the messaging service there, because it's like, okay, where are students already going that they can then get the information from us. And Canvas is definitely going to stay, because it's easier for me to post little things, to update the calendar, than sending out mass emails, because I always,
read their emails.
Right. And to my supervisor, to Anissa, I'm like, they need all this information, but I'm writing, there's too many words. I know they're not going to read it, but it's important. So having those little concise reminders that doesn't have to be this, 3-page email, I think has been helpful for us. So that will be something that we keep up. And we had help with, the IT person in getting us a login, getting all the students enrolled. It's pretty user friendly. So once we made the page and added the students, it's kind of like plug and play from there. So that was helpful for the international office.
Yeah. As you can tell, Jenna works at CCP. So that's why I wanted to kind of ask her. So again, it seems like what I heard from Jenna was that short, sweet, simple messages seem to work, even if it's multiple times instead of one long, big one. I've been learning that myself too. Quick two things. First of all, Richard posted a couple things in the chat. One is the email addresses for all of us at CCP. So feel free to reach out to us directly. If you want a fun thing, Richard posted it. For a good laugh, follow the shenanigans of our spirited mascot leader, Rory. We rolled Rory out, say that 3 times fast. When was it? Year and a half? Almost 2 years?
Fall of 2019.
Yeah. So Rory's our mascot. And then last thing Patrick mentioned, he wanted to remind us about using the app called Remind, because it is a way to send students messages as a group. So you don't have to type every single student the message, but they get it as a text message. So I don't want to keep you guys any longer, but I'm still available. Certainly appreciate the time that you gave to coming to this. I hope that you learned something, something new, or something was reinforced. And I truly appreciate your commitment to continuing the TAAC conferences, those of you who are the TAAC team, Melissa and Karina and Jen and Danny and Tom and everyone else who I don't even know is on the page, because that really means a lot. I know that for those of us in the trenches, it's great to connect. So I was glad that we were able to do this.
And thank you so much, Sandra, for always participating and being a huge supporter of TAAC. Couldn't do it without our community college associates here. So thank you, everybody. Keep an eye out on the blog and everything else. We do have 2 more days, a few more sessions. So we'll hope that you can join us. If you have any questions, reach out to TAAC's email, and we'll be happy to have you join us. Have a good one, everyone.
Bye.
The opportunity.